Olafur Grimsson joins me from Reykjavik. Thank you very much, Mr. Grimsson. We appreciate you giving us the time. So, if Icelandic voters reject this latest deal in the referendum, would the UK and the Netherlands ever get their money back?
Well, I think how you phrase the issue is not really in accordance with the nature of the issue, because this is a dispute based on the governments of the UK and the Netherlands taking unilateral actions and at the time, and also it being highly disputed whether private citizens and taxpayers should be obliged to repay the losses created by a private bank. So I think the way you formulate the issue has to be very careful. But irrespective from that, there have always been two dimensions in this issue. One is the content of the deal, and fortunately the British and the Dutch have now recognized that the demands they were making last year and previously in 2009 were absolutely outrageous. So it's very interesting that the British and the Dutch governments have in fact backed out of their previous demands.
Well, exactly. I mean, this accord... sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Grimsson, but as you quite rightly point out, in this accord, taxpayers will pay, less than a third of the earlier deal. So actually the terms of this deal are better. They have made concessions.
Yes, absolutely. And it's very important looking at the history of the case and what we were arguing about 2 years ago, that the British and the Dutch have now accepted that we had a pretty strong case. So this deal is, of course, much more favorable than the previous deal. But the second element in this dispute has always been the democratic right of the Icelandic people under our constitution to have their final say on this issue. And I think it's very interesting that about 2/3 of the population support my decision to put it to a referendum, but also 2/3 of the people say that they will agree to the deal.
Yes, because polls are now showing that voters may well approve this bill, which has already been approved by the Parliament. But you said that when we talk about this story, it depends on how you frame it, how you word it. Do you agree with the statement that Iceland owes the UK and the Netherlands $5 billion?
No, I don't agree with that statement, because it's disputed by lawyers whether the European regulations under which this bank operated in Britain and the Netherlands really obliged the taxpayers to repay it. So part of the problem in this dispute is that the legal nature of it has not been clear, and you can talk to many lawyers that will confirm that. But on the other hand, we have said all the time that we want to try to solve this problem in a fair way and get it out of our cooperation with these two countries. And
so then, Mr. Grimsson, what will happen if the EFTA court rules that Iceland is obliged to pay the UK and the Netherlands the $5 billion in question?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that, because the legal side of the matter is that it's not at all clear that they will come to that conclusion. The problem is that the legal nature of the European banking formulation has not been thoroughly thought out.
Are you concerned that your rejection of this deal, that your decision to put it to a referendum after it was approved by Parliament, will cause the international investor community to look at Iceland as some kind of pariah that can't be trusted?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's very interesting that after my previous decision a year ago, Iceland's economy is much stronger. Our relationship with the international financial world is much better, and all the predictions that were being put out a year ago about the harm that this decision would do to Iceland have turned out to be completely wrong. Iceland is now in a much better position than it was a year ago, and part of that is the reason why we didn't accept the previous outrageous deal.
Well, it's questionable that Iceland is in a better position. Things might be improving, but there's a great deal of uncertainty.
I mean, no, you can't argue that. I mean, it's absolutely true that we're in a much better position.
OK, well, are you concerned, though, that the country won't be able to roll over the €1 billion it was hoping to refinance in the bond markets?
No, I'm not concerned about that, because various Icelandic companies have been able to raise loans. The central bank has made a report that the debt position of the Icelandic state and the Icelandic nation is in fact better than it has been for a long time. So if you look at it without trying to make a sensation of it, and you look at the actual data, it is in fact quite interesting how quickly and how strongly Iceland has come out of this crisis.
Sure, I mean, looking at the data, and not trying to make a sensation of it, but the Fitch agency, which has Iceland on a non-investment grade rating with a negative outlook. Okay, all right, they're saying, but they have a point, Mr. Grimsson, they have a point when they say that resolving this dispute is absolutely crucial to getting the country back on a stable outlook, to restoring investor confidence.
Well, I mean, if you look at the history of the Fitch rating agency, and I think you should really do it, because it gives you a healthy perspective of the kind of rubbish that these agencies are usually putting forward. We believed some years ago, when the Fitch rating agency were giving the Icelandic banks top ranking. And we believed that because so-called respectable agencies like the Fitch were giving them top ranking, they were perfectly okay. So they were absolutely wrong at that time. And one of the interesting things is that the rating agencies have not had the honesty or the courage to look at their own
Mr. Grimsson, I don't want to talk about, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I don't want to talk about the rating agencies. I mean, ultimately, I guess the issue is about getting this dispute resolved. That's the point that they were trying to make. And unless and until this dispute is resolved, access to international capital markets is going to be very restricted for you, right? That's the point that everyone's making.
No, in fact, that's not the case. That's not the case. It's quite remarkable that many of the major companies in Iceland have last year, and since my previous decision, been able to raise new loans and have very smooth dealings in the international financial markets.
Do you think that your decision will delay Iceland's planned removal of capital controls that was set to begin early next month?
No, of course not, because the referendum will take place in April, so a question of 6 or 8 weeks in respect is neither here nor there.
Are you concerned about how this has affected diplomatic relations with the UK and the Netherlands?
No, of course not, because the reaction in Britain and the Netherlands, and I think that's very good, has been calm, has been reasonable, and much better than it was a year ago or so. And I think the fact that we have, for example, in Britain, a new government, it's absolutely clear that the new coalition government in Britain has dealt with this issue in a much more balanced way than the Gordon Brown government did, because in fact the start of this dispute were unilateral decisions taken by Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown, so we have been much happier with the way that the new coalition government in Britain has dealt with this issue.